I'm Alex. I come from a broken family with a mom who was very controlling and sisters who liked to interfere. Megan, the oldest, was 13 years older than me, and Anna was 10 years older. I guess I wasn't exactly planned, and my parents split up when I was 5 in 1977. Dad took off and never came back. Growing up, I dealt with bullying both at school and at home. All I really wanted was my mom's love, just to feel accepted, but I never got it. Despite all that, I did really well in school. I spent 12 years working hard on my studies. In 1993, Kingston University in South London became my refuge from home. It was there that Holly caught my eye, her beauty and confidence standing in contrast to my shyness. While pursuing my master's in mechanical engineering and design, I noticed Holly, a final year student in creative writing. Despite my reluctance to approach her, she effortlessly attracted attention from other men. With her captivating brown eyes and brown hair standing at 5 feet 5 inches, she seemed out of my league. Those who pursued her were outgoing and popular. To my surprise, one of Holly's friends struck up a conversation with me at a party, leading to Holly's eventual inclusion. Despite my limited experience with women, my humility and bashfulness seemed to attract her. Summoning courage, I asked her out and we began dating. I'm not ashamed to admit she took my innocence, but after about 6 months, rumors surfaced about her involvement with other men. Unable to confirm the claims, I hesitated to confront her. Spoiled by her parents and sister Caroline, Holly's entitled behavior strained our relationship, often causing public scenes that embarrassed me, despite my enduring love. Despite friends' advice to end it, I remained in love, a new feeling for me. After graduation, we secured jobs and a flat outside Southampton, New Hampshire, drawn there by Holly's family, as I had cut ties with mine long ago. A year later, we married, and soon welcomed Sophie into the world, followed by Ava a couple of years later. Holly embraced motherhood, and everything seemed perfect. As I advanced in my career, eventually joining Walker Engineering a decade ago, our finances improved, allowing us to save for a better house. However, the 2008 economic downturn hit hard. Many lost jobs, and securing contracts became challenging, resulting in longer hours without extra pay. It was during this time, with both girls in full-time school, that I discovered Holly's affair with a man from our old university. I remained lost in work, unaware until it was too late. Toby suspected a nearby classmate as Holly's lover at first. Despite my futile attempts to confront Holly, she dismissed my concerns with laughter, though I sensed her deception. Nevertheless, my stable job and income positioned me well to purchase a nice house. Holly consistently urged me to buy a house that reflected our status, whatever that meant. Despite my hesitations, I agreed, and we acquired a charming, detached 5-bedroom house in Southampton. Capitalizing on the buyer's market, we secured a good deal, despite the slightly higher mortgage. Uncharacteristically, I opened a new savings account, solely in my name. I deposited only my bonus share into it. Since I managed all finances and banking as the sole breadwinner, Holly likely remained unaware of it, even if I flashed the receipts before her. Reflecting on it now, that decision turned out to be one of the smartest moves I made. I felt the need for some security, uncertain if Holly might leave me if her old flame reappeared. After that incident, things seemed to go back to normal, and my daughters remained my main focus. I supported their education and spent quality time with them on weekends, taking them to various activities like dance classes, concerts, and the zoo. Holly always seemed too caught up in her outings with her pampered and idle friends. I rarely socialized with other husbands, as we all seemed to be somewhat under our wives' control to different extents. My friends would tease me with the Rolling Stones song "Under My Thumb" whenever I had to cancel plans for what Holly wanted. Even at work, my colleagues would make remarks about my marital situation, particularly Holly's dominance over me. It wasn't until a few months ago that everything reached a breaking point. Ava had recently headed off to college, leaving Holly and me alone together for the first time in nearly 2 decades. Both our daughters were now students at our alma mater. As I assisted Ava in settling into her new apartment alongside her sister, she turned to me and questioned why I was still with their mom. I was caught off guard, as Ava had always been reserved, much like her old man. "I heard she's messing around with Henry Walker over at your company," Ava said, tears starting to well up in her eyes. It was news to me, but I wasn't entirely surprised. Over the years, I could have investigated her affairs but chose not to, fearing it would break up the family and lead my daughters to resent me, much like my sisters resented my dad. I endured her unfaithfulness because I couldn't bear to lose what we had built together, despite still having feelings for her. This revelation had several effects on me. Firstly, it made me realize the depth of my daughter's bitterness towards their mom, much greater than I had realized. Secondly, it stirred up old emotions from my upbringing and how they shaped my vulnerabilities. Lastly, I became aware that I was the target of gossip and mockery at work, particularly from Henry Walker, who happened to be the nephew of the owner and the one betraying me. Feeling completely lost and unable to bear the situation any longer, especially now that my youngest daughter was aware of Holly's ridicule, I knew I had to confront her. My heart raced as I sat at the kitchen table, waiting for Holly to come back. When she finally arrived, I found myself tongue-tied once again. She just glanced at me with what seemed like indifference and disdain as she unpacked her bags. Eventually, I mustered the courage to speak up. I asked Holly about her relationship with someone else. She responded that she wouldn't call it an affair, insisting it wasn't that serious. I felt a mix of shock and disgust, waiting for her to justify her actions. She praised me for being a provider and a friend, but admitted there were certain needs I couldn't fulfill. I was dismayed by her frank admission and questioned if it meant she was cheating on me. Holly clarified that it was only her body involved, not her emotions or thoughts. Stunned by her bold admission, I was left speechless. She casually mentioned exploring relationships with the younger men. Taken aback, I raised my voice, questioning her behavior. Holly warned me not to shout, and despite confessing to being involved with 2 other men, she expected my silence. She gave me an ultimatum: either accept her conditions or risk her leaving for someone else. I stayed quiet, hoping she'd see the pain in my expression. Trying to justify her actions, she argued that her behavior was common among her friends and could even strengthen a marriage. I was shocked by her attempt to justify herself using her friend's actions, finding it selfish and disrespectful. When I suggested the idea of being with another woman, she laughed it off, mocking my ability to connect with other women. She confidently declared that our relationship would continue on her terms, warning me not to ruin a good thing. In truth, she was correct. Throughout our 22-year relationship, I had shown unwavering loyalty and compliance with her desires. Now, everyone knew I was being betrayed, damaging my reputation among friends and coworkers. The next morning at the office, I encountered Henry Walker, the man involved with my wife. With a smirk, he asked about Alex's well-being, his smugness fueling my frustration. I chose to stay silent. By the coffee machine, I overheard some guys laughing. Even Olivia, the boss's secretary, seemed to find my situation funny. Sitting at my desk, I thought about how rough my day had been, feeling like I was being made fun of both at work and at home. Despite trying to concentrate, I couldn't shake off my anger. I decided to dig into my father's background, even though I only knew where he was born and that he left when he was 38 in 1977. I searched family history websites for Cambridgeshire and found a few potential matches. Expecting him to pass away before I went to college, I narrowed it down to 3 options and asked for information on genealogy websites. Lost in my thoughts, my boss Jack called me into his office. Jack, who was successful but had some questionable morals, wanted to have a chat. Despite considering leaving because of how he behaved, his convincing arguments and high salary made me stay. During our conversation, he mentioned his affair with Olivia, his secretary, without his third wife knowing. He casually brought up rumors he'd heard about my wife's infidelity. I fired back, mentioning her affair with my nephew. He acknowledged it, joking about the family tradition of being unfaithful, leaving me speechless. The conversation shifted to work matters. He stressed the importance of family, but warned that if personal problems affected work, I might lose my job. It felt like being scolded by a strict teacher. I held back my reaction, noticing Olivia, Jack's secretary, lingering nearby, probably gathering gossip to share with her pals. Heading out, I wondered why someone young like her would get involved with an older guy like Jack Walker. Passing by her, I heard more giggling, so I kept my head down and kept walking. As the door closed behind me, laughter erupted, clearly aimed at me. Back in my office, I realized I didn't have much purpose there. I'd supported my daughter's education, but now it felt like I was funding my wife's affairs. I'm a simple guy who enjoys gadgets but doesn't need luxury. Most of my money goes towards Holly's indulgences, making me question if I'm truly happy. My office is where I find my creativity and success. I've designed many of the parts produced and sold here, and I'm confident I could find work elsewhere. They see me as weak, and maybe they're right. I'm not one to cause trouble. I'm just good old Alex, the obedient engineer. Looking at my screensaver of a family vacation, I opened my email. I was surprised to find a message from Jennifer Holmes from the Cambridge Genealogy Committee. I was amazed by the quick response when I read her message. Jennifer had seen my inquiry about my dad and connected with a woman who claimed to be his niece, Rachel Murray, my cousin. I immediately sent my contact information, hoping to hear from Rachel soon. Leaving work gave me some relief, and when I got home, Holly greeted me with a smile as she cooked dinner. Although I initially kept my distance, I eventually joined her for the meal. She gently asked if we could talk about the previous night. I replied that it seemed like there was little left to discuss since she had made her position clear. In response, she almost begged, recognizing my qualities as a husband and asking me not to deny her anything. I questioned her betrayal and embarrassment, looking for an honest answer. She seemed flustered, unable to give a satisfactory response. Feeling tired of her selfishness, I thought about all the effort I'd put into making her happy. Despite working long hours to meet our financial needs and wants, all I got in return was disrespect and ridicule. I even drove an older car so she could have a newer one. She admitted to having needs that I couldn't fulfill and gave me an ultimatum: either accept it, as she assumed I would, or she would find satisfaction with a younger man. I spoke up, bringing up Henry Walker's name, letting her know that everyone was aware of his involvement with her. She confessed to the affair, plainly stating that he was essentially my boss and would inherit the company. She laid out the deal. He took care of her needs in bed, and if I didn't agree and accept it, she'd leave me, and he'd provide everything else she wanted and needed. As usual, I didn't say a word and just got up from my chair, heading to my study. Tears streamed down my face, and I wished I could be anywhere else. The phone rang, and when I picked up, I heard an unfamiliar voice on the other end. It was Rachel. We talked for about an hour, and when we hung up, everything else faded away from my mind, and I had a big smile on my face. Rachel was excited that I had decided to look into my father's past and had a lot to tell me. I found out that my mother had indeed kicked my father out of the house, lying to me all throughout my childhood. Sadly, he passed away in 1983 when I was just 11. He died from alcohol poisoning, and my grandmother always blamed my mother for his behavior and mental state. Rachel told me that after leaving us, he wanted to reconnect with me but wasn't able to. We made plans to meet over the weekend at her home in Cambridge. I was thrilled, knowing the break would be good for me. The rest of the week dragged on. Things at home stayed the same, and at work I continued to be mocked behind my back. Henry and his buddies found it amusing to hang a pair of underwear on my office door. I looked at Olivia, but she didn't say anything. The underwear came with a post-it note that said, "Please return to your wife." It crushed me. I sat at my desk and cried once more that day. I wanted to blame everyone but myself. I couldn't take it anymore. When Saturday rolled around, I told Holly I was going to see a friend in London, and she didn't seem to care about my plans. I had a feeling she'd cheat on me, so being away made it easier for her. The trip to Cambridge was stressful, and I got to Rachel's house an hour later than I planned. Surprisingly, she greeted me with the warmest hug I've had in years, not bothered by the delay at all. I met her husband Greg and their kids, Grace and William, and then we got into talking about my dad and our newfound family. Rachel's kindness and openness were clear as she and Greg talked excitedly, often finishing each other's sentences, eager to share our family story. With David and Lucy Price, my cousin and Rachel's brother, joining us, we connected well, swapping stories about my dad and our family. After lunch, we went for a short trip, giving me time to think. When we got back, David and I talked about our jobs and families, and for some reason, I felt comfortable opening up to my new cousins. They gave me solid support, telling me not to put up with my current situation. Leaving Cambridge, I felt like I had a new outlook. After enduring many lies and mistreatment, the kindness and honesty from my new family filled me with hope. I saw that I needed to find happiness not just for myself, but also for my daughters, friends, and this newfound family. I got home around 8 p.m. and found Holly getting ready to go out. I asked about her plans, and she said she was going out with friends. I surprised her by mentioning her other man, Max. She begged me to stop bringing it up, seeming not to care about my feelings. I urged her to stop and be my wife, but she brushed off my concerns, insisting she was and always would be my wife. She asked me not to deny her pleasures, promising to make things easy for me, and said she'd be back by midnight. Ignoring my pleas, she kept threatening and tried to hug me as I turned away. Unmoved, she grabbed her Prada handbag and headed for the door. Asserting my role as her husband, I sternly told her not to go through with her plans. She paused, looking at me as if questioning my authority, then burst into laughter. Mockingly, she asked what I would do, saying I'd never have the guts to leave her and predicting I'd always be there for her. Feeling defeated, I hung my head, realizing I'd been foolish for too long, putting up with her selfishness while neglecting my own needs. It was time to stop pretending and start planning for change. I wasted no time getting started. I began while she was out with Henry or Max, maybe even both together. That's probably what she meant by indulging in her desires and having it all. My anger fueled my thoughts, making it hard to concentrate. I needed to find a way to get rid of any remaining affection I had for her. And I think I found a solution. I found the box with a specific picture of my mom and sisters, the only one I had. Though unsure, I cut out a picture of Holly's face and pasted it next to theirs. With no love left for them, adding Holly's smirking face to the picture might just break my emotional ties. I put it on my study desk around 12:45 a.m. and finished the task. I had mostly figured out my short-term plans, even though it might take a few weeks to carry them out. Luckily, I had time on my side because Holly wasn't expecting me to leave. Though unsure and needing help, I had convinced myself to go through with it by then. I heard someone clumsily coming through the door, and peeking out the window, I saw Henry Walker leaving. As I heard her coming upstairs, I quickly cleared my browsing history, deciding to use incognito mode from now on. After she went to bed, I went downstairs to make some coffee. Thinking about my future without her, especially without my daughters, felt okay. On Monday morning, I made the decision to move closer to my daughters. Heading to work, I was determined not to put up with things anymore. Despite the snide remarks and laughter aimed at me, I scheduled a bank meeting for 1 p.m., using the time before to go over my finances. It was a bit risky, but if things went well and I had the right support, I could come out of it okay. The meeting went according to plan, allowing me to close my savings account and take my name off our joint account. With a decent amount of money in hand, I closed the savings account for cash. On the way back to the office, I stopped by a PC World and bought 2 digital voice recorders, a 500 GB USB 3.0 tough drive, and a new PC hard drive. When I got back, I started accessing the company's private customer files. It took me about an hour to figure out Jack's password. Ironically, it was his wife's name and his 6-digit birthday. Once I got the access I needed, I downloaded all the files to the drive, along with my plans and designs for the energy-efficient hydraulic pump system, which would set the company up for future success. We made pumps for air conditioning units, heavy machinery, and even for the dairy industry. After clearing my PC history, including all my plans and work, I shut it down, replaced the hard drive with a new one, packed everything in my bag, and reinstalled Windows. The rest of the day I spent looking into competitors on my phone and checking out engineering jobs in the South London, Surrey area on Monster before calling it quits. That night, after another quiet dinner, I headed to my study. I came across an interesting opportunity. A major competitor struggling during the financial downturn needed a mechanical engineer for basic design and shop floor management. Though not exactly what I wanted, it was close. Despite the £10,000 lower salary they offered compared to my current job, I quickly sent them my CV. To keep up appearances with Holly, I decided to sleep in our marital bed that night. But when she came in, I pretended to be asleep. Her touch made me feel sick, but strangely, it felt good to react this way. I was starting to feel disgusted by her, which would help me in the long run. The next day, Robert Williams from Sutton Hydraulics called, surprised by my potential move from Walker Engineering to his smaller firm. Although he was almost ready to offer me the job right away, I asked for an interview the following day, which he agreed to. Another important piece fell into place, and things were moving quickly. With plenty of time on my hands, I started looking into flats in the area. Eventually, I found one just 15 minutes from my daughters and 5 minutes from work. I scheduled a viewing for the day after my interview with Robert Williams. Later, I told Jack I needed to visit my daughters in Kingston to sign some papers the next day, and he casually agreed. That night, I called my old friend Toby Brown and set up a meeting with him and his wife Sarah for the following evening after my interview and flat viewing. Toby and Sarah were curious, sensing that I had something important to share. Before meeting them, I talked to my daughters about what was going on, and they were supportive and understanding. During our get-together, I explained the first steps of my plan to Toby and Sarah. They were surprised that I was standing up for myself, more than they were shocked by Holly's unfaithfulness, which they saw as common. Sarah asked why I was leaving Holly while offering me another cup of tea. I told them about what I learned from my cousins, how my mom had kicked out my dad and how my sisters sided with her. I mentioned that this time my daughters were on my side. Toby wondered if what I found at the grave pushed me to take a stand. I explained that it was something I noticed on my father's tombstone that shocked me into making the decision to leave. They both asked what I saw on the stone. I revealed it had a rose picture with "in loving memory," along with my father's birth date and age at passing, which happened to be the same as mine. Toby and Sarah seemed to understand better after hearing that. I told them how I had to make a tough decision when faced with situations that could lead to alcoholism, or worse, according to my grandma's beliefs. Instead of following in my dad's footsteps, I chose to stand up for myself. I went on to say that I couldn't keep trying to be the perfect husband, enduring mistreatment and ridicule. It was hard to admit to my friends how low I had sunk. Sarah offered her support and shared her plan to protect herself and get back at Holly. I appreciated her strength, despite my past suspicions about her affair. I explained my financial plan, how I set up a separate savings account in 2008 to deposit all my bonuses and extra money. Getting a mortgage only in my name made it easier for me to apply on my own. I also outlined Toby's role in transferring ownership of my house to a new company he would create, settling the mortgage and transferring the deeds through the land registry. Toby was skeptical about the plan, but I assured him that Holly wouldn't be able to contest it. I pointed out that her religious parents, upon finding out about her affair, would prioritize their principles over supporting her. They agreed and even offered to help cover the mortgage, giving me some breathing room on payments. On my way back home, I stopped by the local Land Rover dealership. There, I talked with the dealer about trading Holly's car for the latest model. We ended the payment plan for her old Range Rover Sport, which was good for the dealership because they could sell it again. I told the dealer I'd come back for my own upgrade, knowing he could make up for the cost of Holly's car by selling it almost like new. I said sorry for any trouble, but explained that selling me an expensive new Range Rover would make up for it. After that, I grabbed a brochure for the 2016 model, not for myself, but for Holly. When I got home, she was sitting in the living room looking tired. I took off my jacket, dropped my bag, and got ready for the next part of my plan. I told Holly how much I loved her and wanted her to have the best. I said I was going to trade in her car and get her the new 2017 model, pointing it out in the brochure. She got excited, saying she loved the new car, not knowing my plan yet. She thanked me for making her feel better, mentioning the only issue was that someone already wanted to buy my car. She suggested we go to the dealership on Friday afternoon to sort it out. She even suggested I use her car for the weekend to see my other friends, but she seemed surprised at her own suggestion, with a shocked and confused look on her face. When I asked what was wrong, she didn't say anything specific, but asked if I was still upset about our arrangement. I made it clear that the arrangement was hers, not ours, and stressed that I had no say in it. I asked if I had to just accept it, hoping for a response. She simply nodded, looking like she had won and I had given in. Even with everything going on, she said she loved me and seemed genuinely worried. I didn't say anything back and went into the kitchen. My phone rang, so I went to the backyard to answer it. Toby confirmed that the money had been transferred. I was all set for the next day. Without wasting time, I went to the bank and met with the mortgage specialist. An hour later, the mortgage was paid off, and I closed all my remaining accounts. Then, I went to another bank and opened a new account. I felt relieved, knowing I wouldn't have to pay anything unless Holly took legal action and dragged me to court, but that thought wiped the smile off my face. The following day, I contacted the land registry and filled out the necessary online forms. With all the details about Toby and Sarah's new company, I got a confirmation email within 10 minutes, saying it would take 3 to 5 days to finish. Once it was done, I just had to give the deeds to Toby, and he could register the property under his company. On that very day, I knocked on Jack's office door, finding Olivia as usual. Fridays were when he usually spent time with her, and I think I interrupted their private time. She left us alone after that. I placed my resignation letter on his desk, and he looked at me with that annoying smirk. He asked me about the document I was holding. I told him it was my resignation letter and suggested that leaving right away might be the best move, given our family situations. I hinted that maybe he wouldn't want me sticking around for too long. He seemed shocked by the news. I boldly asked him to have my P45 ready by Monday and stressed not telling anyone Holly didn't know about my departure. He begged me, saying they really needed me. I pointed out that they seemed to need his nephew more. I told him I'd come back on Monday to pick up the rest of my stuff. Sneakily, I pretended to drop a pin from my pocket, using it as cover to slip a digital recorder out of my sock. I rigged it up as a pin and discreetly placed it under the seat cushion, recording as I stood back up. Ending the talk, I mentioned I had stuff to do and left his office. As a final jab, I told him not to come running back when he's broke, hinting that the only reason his cheating wife stayed with him was his money. I grinned, knowing it got under his skin. I turned and walked out of his office. An hour later, I drove home, picked up Holly's car and registration papers, and dropped off her car at the dealership. John Reeves kindly offered to drive me home, and I accepted his offer gratefully. When I got home that night, Holly was sitting at the kitchen table with big red bags under her eyes. I could tell she had been crying. I asked her what happened. Reluctantly, she told me she had contracted gonorrhea. I burst out laughing. Oh, did I laugh? She just glared at me. I suggested she take the medications to get better, and you could feel the tension in the air. That night, for the first time in months, I slept like a baby. The next morning, I slept in the spare room and woke up feeling refreshed. The good night's sleep had done wonders for me. I entered our bedroom and gently woke Holly, explaining that I was giving her space to rest and recover. Holly said she felt like I found her disgusting, but I stayed silent. Tears started rolling down her cheeks as she admitted to messing up big time. She told me she loved me and wanted me to get better. At first, I felt sorry for her, but that feeling disappeared faster than I thought it would. It surprised me. It hit me then that I didn't have any love left for the woman I'd been married to for 21 years. Could love really fade away so quickly? It seemed so because I was done, and her situation didn't change my mind. I left the room. Without saying anything, I got in my car and drove off feeling content. That night, I stayed with Toby and Sarah, who threw a dinner party with lots of friends and colleagues. When I got back home late Sunday morning, Holly was up doing chores. Walking into the living room, she rushed over and hugged me when she saw me. I just patted her on the back. Excitedly, I suggested we arrange for the new car to be delivered, offering to drop her off in town to meet her sister, who could then drive her to the dealership. I imagined her driving back in the new Range Rover, and she smiled, coming towards me with open arms. As I turned back to the kettle, I pretended not to notice her. Throughout the day, Holly was overly affectionate, which made me uncomfortable. She kept trying to kiss or hug me, but I kept finding reasons to leave. By bedtime, I noticed she had been crying again. Wishing her good night, she asked if I would sleep with her and said she wanted to cuddle and hear reassurances. Feeling nothing, I said it wouldn't happen until she got the all clear from the doctor. I firmly asserted that she made her bed, to which she retorted bitterly, stating that when she got better, she was sure she could find a man willing to be in bed with her, as she had plenty of lost time to make up for. I chuckled to myself. It took a while, but there it was, her harshness returning. All the regrets from Friday night were gone, replaced by 21 years of resentment. In the past, I might have fallen for her manipulations, but this time, I ignored her tears and went to the spare room. It would be my last night in the house. And I was relieved she said those things. It removed any lingering doubts I might have had. As I looked at the picture I had altered, all I felt was hatred for her. She was only nice when she wanted something and mean when she didn't get it. I woke up early Monday morning. Holly was also up early for her 8:30 hair appointment, so I drove her into town as planned. I left, knowing it could be the last time I ever saw her. I hoped it would be, but I was determined to make it so. On the way, I called the mobile phone company and canceled both our contracts. Pulling over into a lay-by, I paid the penalty on my card. They said the phones would remain in service until 5 p.m. perfect. Next, I went to the office to pick up my P45. As I entered the factory, the atmosphere felt heavy. It seemed news of my leaving had spread, causing some of my colleagues to look worried. Unsure why they seemed uneasy, I walked down the corridor toward my office, passing by the coffee machine where a group usually gathered. I wasn't sure if Max and Henry knew about their connection with my wife, but they grinned at me, joking with others. I greeted them with a forced smile, saying good morning. They joked about my wife, which usually got laughs, but I didn't find it funny. I responded that she wasn't doing well, hinting that one of them had given her a surprise she didn't like. I left them stunned, and when I glanced back, they looked shocked, causing a bit of a stir before I went upstairs. Approaching Olivia, she gave a slight smile and nodded, maybe indicating she respected me more now. Jack appeared at the door before I could knock. He told me he had what I needed and told me to grab it and leave. Maybe I was imagining that respect. When I went into his office, I sat down and discreetly slipped a recorder into my pocket from under the chair. I knew he'd been with Olivia, his usual Friday thing, and now I had it on tape. He snapped, asking if I had another job lined up. At first, I ignored him, but then I admitted I didn't have anything lined up. He smirked, probably thinking I'd come back begging. I asked about my last month's pay and end-of-year bonus, and he burst out laughing. Olivia came in with my P45, and when she asked what was funny, Jack explained that I wanted my bonus and pay, finding it hilarious. Olivia laughed too. Deciding to play along, I laughed too, making them stop and stare at me like I was crazy. Olivia asked why I was laughing, and I shot back, asking her why she let the old man use her every week. I laughed even harder, and they froze, with Olivia's eyes wide and Jack turning red with anger. Jack got mad and called me a scoundrel, telling me to get out of his office and his company before he had the guys drag me out. Chuckling, I left, grabbed the rest of my stuff from my office and went home. Still chuckling to myself, I unloaded the back seats, opened the trunk, and went inside the house. Looking around the rooms, I thought about what I should take. I wrapped up a few Romero Brito artworks in plastic I found in the garage and loaded them into my car. Going through the house, I collected various items and emptied my wardrobe upstairs. I made sure to grab all the important paperwork from the safe, like the girls' birth certificates and my wedding certificate. Using a ladder, I got my old stuff from the loft, including my degree and family photos. In the master bedroom, I gathered all the jewelry I had given Holly over the years, worth over 10,000 pounds. I also took all the handbags, shoes, and expensive coats I had bought. Actually, the whole wardrobe was mine, so I packed it all up. Keeping good records for insurance would be helpful when selling everything. Once I finished packing, I realized I needed a TV, so I grabbed that along with my movie collection and Blu-ray player. My car was already full, so I decided to leave all of Holly's clothes and some other unnecessary stuff, like some of my old clothes. Anumi would need a new wardrobe, and the girls could help me with that. I packed the best pictures of me and the girls in the car. There wasn't a rush since Holly wouldn't be back until after 2 p.m. Took a moment to have a cup of tea. It's a must-have, like it's written in the Magna Carta. Called the TV company to cancel the satellite phone and internet. Also got in touch with British Gas and Southern Water to cancel utilities. It would take a few days, but I didn't mind. Went back to the bedroom and sat on the bed. Noticed something that gave me an idea, one that even scared me. Holly's wedding dress was up in the wardrobe in an old box. She loved it, maybe more than me. Took it down and found our wedding album among the box of photos on the bed. Grabbed the duvet cover, gathered everything, and headed to the garden. Dumped everything into a pile, including Holly's clothes and stuff I couldn't sell. Left her underwear alone, didn't want any reminders. Closed up the car and checked the time. Only 1:45 p.m. called Robert Williams and said I'd drop off my P45 later with the night shift, ready to start fresh tomorrow. He sounded happy, and I hoped I'd made his day. At 2 p.m., I sat waiting for the call. Found some paint thinners in the garage and poured it all over the wedding dress in the garden. Just as I was about to light the fire, my phone rang. I answered calmly, and Holly's voice came through, demanding to know what was going on. I replied sarcastically, asking her what she meant. She kept pressing, saying I shouldn't play dumb. I asked her to calm down, and asked what was happening. There was silence, and I could hear her breathing heavily and what sounded like her sister in the background. She mentioned she had heard I didn't get her a new car, but sold hers instead. Jokingly, I hinted that I might have forgotten to mention that. She sounded frantic, asking what was happening. Keeping my cool despite my fast heartbeat, I told her that from now on, if she wanted a car, she had to pay for it herself. She yelled back, sounding confused and frustrated. I repeated that she heard me correctly and added that I needed to clean up the kitchen. She asked if it was some kind of cruel joke, but I stayed silent. She said we'd discuss it when she got home, upset about being tricked. I didn't respond. I ended the call while she kept yelling my name. Stepping outside, I lit a match and set fire to the pile. Our past went up in smoke as I walked away. Taking our marriage certificate from my pocket, I ripped it into pieces and left it on the kitchen table, along with a single photo of us at Disneyland, capturing happier times. I wondered if she also cherished those memories. Getting into my car, I drove away. Glancing back, I saw Holly and Jennifer rushing into the house without looking up. I turned off my phone with a smile and kept driving. By 4 p.m., I arrived in Sutton. Figuring I had some time, I stopped by a nearby phone store to get a new mobile plan. At work, I sorted out my P45 with the admin team and met Freya, my new secretary, who was professional despite being young, unlike Olivia. Back at my empty apartment, I made tea with a kettle borrowed from home. I unpacked and ordered pizza for dinner. Checking my old phone, I saw it was disconnected. I smirked, knowing Holly was now without a phone too, giving the girls a break from her. Setting up my sleeping bag in the living room, I waited for dinner. Furniture would come over the weekend, but for now, I enjoyed the distance from Holly. Turning on my laptop, I listened to recordings from Jack Walker's office, revealing his affair with Olivia. After saving the evidence, I made copies on USB sticks and addressed them to Jack's wife Margaret and Olivia's boyfriend Peter. I planned to mail them the next day. Lastly, I called my daughter Sophie to update her, warning her not to tell her mother where I was, which she hadn't done yet since Holly couldn't reach her. Throughout the week, I furnished my apartment and redirected customers from Walker Engineering to Sutton. While some remained loyal to Jack, most preferred our services, causing Walker's business to suffer. I anticipated Jack's realization of the reason for his company's decline, but didn't really care. With utilities shut off at my old house, Holly would notice my absence as she struggled to pay bills. Toby started the process of selling the house, with Sarah's support, and by the end of the week, there were signs up advertising the property for sale. During this period, Ava reached out to me, informing me that Holly had moved back in with her parents, where they were not pleased with her infidelity. Holly was furious with me, which strangely made me feel satisfied, although I knew the situation wasn't resolved. By the weekend, Toby and Sarah hosted another successful dinner party, giving me a break from my escape plan. Sunday brought good news. After just a week on the market, I received 2 serious offers of £550,000 for the house, one of which I accepted right away. Getting ready for the sale, I set up ISAs for the girls and made investments, making sure Toby was compensated and keeping some cash for my own safety. Looking after myself remained a top priority. As the week went on, Toby's news about the quick sale made me happy. I wasted no time and hired a removal company to clear out my old house. Meanwhile, the girls contacted their mom, who responded with anger and threats. I reassured them that things would get better soon and offered them comfort. On Tuesday morning, while talking to a new client, who had recently met with Jack Walker, I got some shocking news about Walker Engineering's troubles. The client said the company had to let go of half its staff due to losing many projects. He also mentioned that Mrs. Walker was divorcing Jack because of his affair. Even though I didn't feel sorry for Jack, I couldn't help but think about the commission checks. I wasn't sure about Olivia and her boyfriend's situation, but I knew he got my gift. Whether Mrs. Walker got hers or not, it was clear why they were getting divorced. I wondered what Mrs. Walker's friends and family would say about her affair with an older man. In appreciation of my work, I received a brand new Land Rover Discovery HSE. Although I had thought about treating myself before, Robert and the executives were so pleased with my work and the company's success that they gave me the car along with a hefty commission of over £30,000. Looking at my new car from my office window, I was surprised to see a familiar Ford Focus pulling into the parking lot. It turned out to be Diane, Holly's mother. Expecting a confrontation, I prepared myself as my office phone rang. My secretary, Freya, told me that my wife was waiting in the reception area. I asked her to tell the woman I was in a meeting and that I would come down in an hour. 3 hours later, I glanced out the window and saw her still waiting. With a sigh, I decided to leave for the night, ready to confront her if needed or just drive past if she didn't see me. I went out through a side door toward my car, but just as I was about to get in, I heard tires screech and suddenly, she blocked me in with her car. Stepping out, she came toward me, clearly furious, looking disheveled, and wearing clothes that seemed borrowed from her sister, with messy hair adding to her chaos. "You idiot!" she screamed, trying to slap me but missing. Fueled by anger, she demanded to make things right. I urged her to calm down and invited her to sit in the car with me. Surprised by the new car, she talked about her financial struggles and begged for me to come back. I told her that I felt useless in her life since I couldn't meet her needs and didn't compare to her younger lovers. Then she begged me to return home, saying she wanted to move on and forgive me. I couldn't believe it and asked if she was joking. She said she forgave me for ruining her things in her life. I questioned her forgiveness, pointing out her cheating, disrespect, and nerve to act like she was forgiving me. I firmly said I would never be with her again and suggested she go be with one of her lovers. She said her friends treated her differently since the separation, with their husbands questioning her loyalty. Although she admitted some fault for her troubles, I still felt sorry for her. She accepted the consequences of her actions, admitting she ruined a good life because of greed and disrespect. But I knew I had to move on. She begged me to come back into her life, saying she had nothing left. She asked about her share of the house and mentioned getting a divorce. I pointed out she never once said she loved me, just that she needed me, while I didn't need her. I confessed I had defaulted on the mortgage and lost the house, admitting I lied. She was shocked, and I realized the purpose of her visit. I said I wanted a divorce, and she begged desperately, claiming she loved me. After more than 20 years together, she begged, admitting a mistake and facing severe consequences. I stressed it was a huge, unforgivable mistake, firmly stating I would never go back to her. She screamed and pleaded, filling the car with her cries. I proposed a deal, suggesting a clean split and offering £30,000 in cash if she agreed. Her attitude shifted, and she became determined. She yelled, threatening to take me to court for everything, insisting I didn't really lose the house and was too clever for that. Admitting she was right, I found myself on the defensive. I started by firmly stating she wouldn't get a dime from me. She stood her ground, and I explained I'd fight her for everything, and then some. I emphasized she had no money, and I'd move my assets around to make it hard for her to find them. I cautioned that by the time her lawyer tracked anything down, the bill would eat up any gain. I gave her a choice: take the money offered or deal with the consequences of a legal battle, never looking away. She angrily exclaimed, accusing me of mistreatment despite claiming to love me. She went on to assert that our girls would thrive because of her, contrasting their future success with what she saw as her own flaws. I told her to take the money and leave my life, and she agreed, agreeing to accept the money and proceed with the divorce. I assured her I would arrange everything, and she stormed out of my car, slamming the door behind her. Shortly after, she sped away from the parking lot. The next day, I started the divorce process, citing infidelity as the reason. A week later, I met Holly at the girls' apartment. Despite selling my house, I held off on investing until the paperwork was signed. It was tough to keep things civil in front of the girls. I handed Holly the cash, and she signed the papers. After saying goodbye to the girls and wishing Holly well, I got ready to go. Suddenly, Holly started crying, but I suspected it might have been more for the girls' sake. Sophie and Ava exchanged looks, and Ava mentioned seeing me next weekend at the Coldplay concert they were excited about. I went back to the room where Holly kept crying, unnoticed by the others. Then I understood what Ava meant about the concert. Sophie asked about our plans, and I said I'd check with Amy and let them know during the week before I left. Ignoring Holly's yelling as I walked out, I shut the door behind me.